Otherworldly, Changing Times, Changing Worlds talk show. Wednesday nights we get together, and sometimes I have guests that are they're like the often are the teachers at Changing Times, Changing Worlds. And so but tonight we're doing a discussion, which would be the equivalent of a panel at the conference. And I love the panels. I love the idea of getting people from many, many different communities and having their perspectives to put it together, and we can all learn from each other. One of the things that happened that led to the creation of Changing Times, Changing Worlds, I went to a conference on, I think it was called Witches Heal, I'm not sure, down in the Virginia area. And while we were setting up our tent at midnight, having gotten massively lost on the way, somebody's put out those lights, we're having a cauldron down here. I was like, okay, we're just maybe 15 minutes while we put it up. We're doing a cauldron. I never found out what the heck they meant by we're doing a cauldron, but apparently they considered that sufficient explanation to justify telling us rather loudly that we must not have any light to set up our tent. And so that was part of the reason that we had a glossary in some of the earliest program books for Changing Times, Changing Worlds, because how are we to communicate if we don't know what the other person says when they're using a word that seems self-explanatory? And if anybody ever is able to tell me what a cauldron is down in some group of pagans in the Virginia area, I would love to find out. But
sorry, I'm in the Northern Virginia area and I have never heard it.
Yeah, well, who knows what it meant to them? That is one of the problems of having Wicca or modern witchcraft set up as a mystery religion that where we're going to do things. This is leading into symbols. For instance, some of the covens I have encountered had pentagrams with the one point up for lower degrees, and then when you got to an upper degree, you had a pentagram with a down pointing arrow. Downward point. So what we think of as inverted, I think of as an inverted pentagram, but it meant a higher level of knowledge. Well, you can get into a lot of trouble with that, with all of the different groups that don't use that particular symbolism. And that is the difficulty with symbolism. Symbols are images, usually, that mean something. Generally, it is something that is fairly recognizable. What 3-year-old does not recognize the golden arches or the logo for Pepsi or Coke, or their favorite snack, whether it's pirate booty or Campbell's soup? Oh yeah, the mouse. Everybody knows the mouse. Yeah, and a certain governor should have known better than to mess with the mouse. But I mean, you don't mess with the mouse. It's got more power than most of us do. But symbols are meant for communication. You can convey so much with one symbol. That was one of the things that I didn't much care for the book, The Golden Compass, but it expressed beautifully that there were levels of meaning that you could go down, and that they conveyed beautifully, and that justified the book to me. I don't. The movie had no justification, I don't think, but symbols express a lot, and they aren't necessarily just a mark on paper or on a hieroglyph on stone obelisk, or any of the other many things that a symbol can be. Could be A bird symbolizes freedom. An anchor symbolizes security. A seed symbolizes potential. There are a lot of symbols that are pretty freaking semi-evident to anybody who's using them. But then we get from, that's your basic symbol, and we go on to magical symbols, which I think this group is going to think of, because when you get to the magical laws of contagion and similarity, you can use a piece of something for the whole thing. So a bit of a meteorite can symbolize the sky, or a splinter of wood can represent an oak tree. So it's these are things that when you get to magic, the symbol, kind of important to know what it is you're going after. And then when you but they can alter in different cultures, so that you don't they don't always mean the same thing to himself. For instance, you might represent a seed as a dot, but a dot could also be a starting point. A dot could be a bunch of dots could be seeds, which is what I would probably think if I saw a bunch of dots. But that doesn't necessarily mean that. So when you get a little bit more complicated, and then when you get into religious symbolism, you get into applied symbolism. You get into, we have, for instance, the Christians have taken a hideous torture device, which the Romans were not averse to using, and it became a symbol of great comfort and protection to many Christians for 2,000 years. If you ask most Christians, they are not going to even see a crucifix as a symbol of torture, but a symbol of sacrifice and God's love, and which it doesn't necessarily, it's not inherently obvious in the symbol. So, numbers and letters, sometimes when you get very basic, the symbols that we think we use most often are probably numbers and letters. But and then there's the math symbols we all learned in school, but there's a lot of other really cool ones. One of my favorite is the one that's 3 dots and a triangle, which means therefore. I love the whole concept of therefore. We have laid this out, and then therefore this is the result. Equals is a lovely thing, and we see equal in a lot of the anti-bigotry stuff. There is a certain amount of flack going on in the anti-gay movement, because they say you're co-opting God's beautiful "I'm not going to kill you guys in a fit of pique anymore" symbol, and into we're supposed to accept everybody. Like, deal with it, guys. But this the rainbow. The rainbow is kind of a miraculous symbol for everybody, which can be a bridge across the sky. It's become very common to talk about the rainbow bridge for pets, less so with humans crossing the rainbow bridge. Musical notation, it's another form of writing, which some people probably didn't have drilled into them, than some of us did. But when you do that, the musical notation means something. Heraldry system was invented using colors and symbols so that you could recognize people when they had their faces covered because they had their helmets on, and which is very like the business logos that we see today. There's so many kinds of symbols, and I love symbols. I have 4 or 5 books on symbols, which I enjoy because I like to know what the what was it? If Thor were here today, he could talk to us about American Sign Language, and he's been working on developing commonly known terms that pagans use that haven't needed to be created for American Sign Language, and he wants to get that distributed enough so that it becomes common throughout the ASL community. This becomes really important. There is a lovely story from the SCA where the scouts, who are non-combatants who would go around in very light armor and peek and sneak through the woods, and they would report back to the commanders of their army how many people and what kind of opposition is around the next hill or through those trees. And they came up with a system of hand signals that could explain how many and what kind of armor they had and who's in charge of it. Nobody taught the commanders. So they're over there safely out of range of because in the SCA, a non-armored person, all you have to do is put your hand on their shoulder and say, "Scout, you're dead," and the scout was dead. But so keeping at range makes sense, but they'd be over there going, and the commanders would say, "Get over here. You gotta tell us what's going on." Communication does not take place unless it's two-way. So anytime I look at symbols, I think, we have to have the same meaning behind them. And for example, have you gone through a array of emojis and tried to pick one that has the right amount of grin or the right amount of tears to express how you're feeling? Emojis are a modern symbol. They are ideograms.
There's one common one I see that's two hands coming together like this.
Mm-hmm.
And I see it used both for a high five and for prayer.
Yeah, I would have thought prayer, but
yeah, high five works too, but that's why I don't generally use emojis. They pop up the screen and I go,
what the heck?
Run away, close the screen.
If you hover over that emoji, it does say prayer. Does it?
Oh my
If
God.
you hover over the emoji, some of them say, well, blush, or they give you all kinds of things, but sometimes they don't. It's not, you can't find the one you need, but they try. That's something I didn't know. Yes, if you hover over it before you click it. Okay.
That's important.
Prayer. Or it says blush. Or it says oops. Or it says all kinds of things, but you can't always find the ones you want, and you're not sure if the other person actually knew what they were clicking on when they put it there. So you got to be careful.
Even with that, you have the situation where, as we become a more international culture, this happened a lot in California, where there were a lot of Asian students, in which case a sign of I'm embarrassed and I'm not going to do that anymore was giggling, and the American raised principals would get very angry. You're not taking my lecture seriously,
right?
Which make the poor girls giggle even harder. And
yes,
that communication was not there. And
societal norms and conventions are from different across cultures are really hard. What means aggression versus submission versus I'm on board with you? The same facial expression or reaction can mean any of those depending on what society and culture you're looking at. I
Well,
mean, I started out as an East Asian studies major. I worked into stuff. I worked into all kinds. I've worked across cultures, and it's like, yeah, what an Asian person means when they giggle versus what a French person means when they giggle versus what a British person means when they giggle versus what an American person means when they giggle. Those are, each one is different.
Yeah, we were raised that we should never ever shriek as if we were excited. You go to a playground today, there's a lot of shrill shrieking, which I have often dashed to the defense of somebody I thought was really in deep trouble, and it turned out they were just excited.
right.
Don't make that sound unless you need to be rescued, please, kids. This is
My
but
favorite symbol or sign, as you wish, that I never realized had such a huge impact is that we know when we say thumbs up, that, that's a good deal. Unfortunately, in most Arab countries, it means up yours.
Yeah, it's
And our
different.
soldiers are blindly going around and smiling and waving when the Arabs tell them to go stuff it.
mhm.
There are huge differences. So using those kind of symbols, unless we go, there's an agreed upon, standard that's going to be universal, but it isn't right now. It's cultural, and you can screw yourself up really bad culturally, in talking to people. So, and as you were talking about, Chipikan, you hear the shrieks and screams on the playground. You have to go, no, it's not just, it's louder, let's go. You have to go listen to they're teeny tiny tenors. And I came from a theater background. I worked in theater, and there's 5 different kinds of really loud shrieks and screams. There's the one, oh my God, somebody's killing me. There's, oh my God, I just found a dead body. There's, oh my God, that puppy is the cutest thing I ever saw in my life. There's, yeah, and they're all like screaming at the top of your lungs, especially if you're a kid. But there are slightly different nuances. And we had to learn not only to hear them, but to project them so that an audience would get the right interpretation.
But the right audience.
Yeah, I mean, your audience in a theater, if you're in a play, do I scream that, oh my God, I just found a dead body? Or, oh my God, somebody's coming at me with a knife? Or, oh my God, that's the cutest puppy I ever saw. I mean, which scream are you doing?
Well, I think the puppy one is pronounced squee or something.
Well, it'd be like,
So if you want to have a sun sign, if you want to use a pentagram, I saw a wonderful poster once where somebody had like 20 different religions and what the pentagram meant in all of these 20 religions, which included Christianity, and they were almost universally positive. And I would love to have had a copy of that, but that was the personal property.
I wish I had that. I really wish I had that, because I'm finding stuff that has it all over the map, and a lot of 95% of them are negative.
Well, we are also dealing with the fact that not only can a symbol differ from culture to culture, a symbol can change very quickly, as in the 30s, the 1930s, where the swastika went from being a symbol of the sun to which it still is in most Hindu and so many Native Americans, and it turned into a symbol of hatred and bigotry and the warping of the human soul. That it means now, and it's going to be a very long time before it can ever be anything else. I understand the Dine, who had been using that, which they refer to as the whirling log, in their tribal symbolism. They've said this has become so traumatizing to many people who see it, we're not going to use it until it becomes safe to not be something that is going to be hard on people. And it's like, that's really kind of them. And in India, they're still using it because, heck, they've been using it for 5,000 years. And I said, we don't care about you and your stupid European conflict. But and
good for them.
Yeah, there's actually a holiday that is called Rehabilitate the Swastika Day. And I supported it for years, but I'm not entirely certain it's possible in our lifetimes to get past it, since it has been revived by the people who have been given permission to hate openly. I
thought once years ago that it could be rehabilitated and be brought back in, but in the last 8 years, no, it has become again.
It's been revived by people who want to use it for hate. So
who use it for hate. And I'm sorry, personally, what I think of it is one thing, but will I ever use it socially? No,
I'm afraid not. But that is a way a symbol can be changed. And I think that is essentially what we refer to as desecration. But that would be a religious symbol. And those they are kind of programmed. They are.
Question.
Yes, please.
You talked about it being it revived and being desecration. Now, what do you see as how could people bring discussion and open questions and do stuff? Is it possible to open a dialogue, or is it just something that needs to be just shut down until it dies again in another 50 years?
I think that, like many forms of bigotry, it should be challenged where reasonable. There are just some places you're not going to walk up to a demonstration of the KKK and the Proud Boys and say that you're using that symbol inappropriately. But on a one-to-one conversation with somebody who was using it as a sign of I'm a white person and I have a right to have white pride, explaining to them that is not a symbol of white pride might be a good thing to do with it. I think this may be the most important aspect of currently discussing symbolism, because we have to be careful in how we use symbols and how we read symbols, because when humans use symbols, it's a thing. We do that, but as we've already covered, it's very difficult to it's not hard to mess up reinterpreting somebody else's symbolism, and we don't want to do that. I mean, personally, if I see somebody walking around with a swastika and a Confederate flag, that's
pretty
to me symbolically says, okay, this is a guy that you want to avoid if at all possible, and no amount of reasoning with him is probably going to have any impact on his behavior. That's what that symbol means to me, is that somebody who is really wrapped up in liking to hate.
Can I ask a question on a different level?
Oh, absolutely.
If we look at how popular interpretation of various symbols, such as the swastika or a pentagram or whatever, goes, and in popular culture, how does that reconcile with your personal magical use of that or spiritual use of that? And how does it weigh? How do you balance my personal beliefs, uses, etc.? How much of that can be offset by huge cultural things that are different? Does it diminish my use of that magic? Or can my magic actually diminish the popular perception?
I think in magic you have to be really careful. I run into this in runes a great deal because there are many different interpretations of runes, and something as simple as lagu, which is for water. And if you can you imagine a symbol that has more meanings than water? Jane uses it for inevitability because water will always get in no matter how good you think your roof is.
Water and air.
You could have water you've got your, you can have a totally calm mirror-like lake you can have it be deep unplumbed depths, or it can be just a reflective puddle. It can be pounding surf. It can be pouring rain. It can be that water which is keeping you alive. There's so many.
And it can also be the water that's flowing and taking the illness away from you. It can be lots of things.
And the universal solvent. So in magic, when you're using, for instance, the rune lagu, I just focus on that aspect of what I'm using the water for in that magical procedure. I think that to a certain extent, anytime we do use symbolism and magic, we may be focusing on whatever it is that we're doing. But you have to be careful because the runes have had meanings that they've been using magically for 2,000 years, and they may just give you what they do rather than what you would hope they
and
would want to
not
do.
only that, but I'm talking more about not just rune, but it includes runes or other bigger symbols, and how popular culture is giving them certain things that may be different from your personal perception. How
Do you have another
much
example?
do you have to protect yourself? Your own interpretation of maybe a pentagram, or maybe a certain rune or whatever, versus what the popular culture. How do you weigh your own personal self and your influence and ability to use that against what 900 million people are screaming is not the way you interpret it? Can you balance it?
I believe very much that your own personal belief of the symbol is what counts when you're using that symbol. Because unless you're getting totally swallowed up by popular culture, that is what you believe, not the thing that popular culture thinks.
Also, I could add the fact that if you use a symbol for any purpose, you have to remember that what matters also is that you are focusing your intent. And I mean, you see this where a positive or neutral symbol has been turned into a black smudge on the universe by bad intent.
Yeah.
And even if a given symbol like a rune has different interpretations, and the rune may have attitudes of its own. If the room's attitudes disagree with yours, you are the one doing the magic.
Mhm.
And the most the room can do is say, well, sorry, buddy, I'm out of here. But you always have to, I don't care how many people are saying there's a cow walking up the wall. I don't see a cow, so I don't care if they see a cow. And I realize that cultural pressures can get large,
Okay.
but there have been people throughout the ages who resist that.
And as Star Wolf says in the comment, runes definitely have their personal attitudes. I agree with that.
Yes.
There are some symbols that have been used magically for so long
Mm-hmm.
that they definitely have their own, so many people have agreed that this was this thing for so long,
Right.
it's imbued with it innately. But you take a symbol like, you say, okay, well, that's a fascist symbol now.
Yeah.
It's a far right symbol. And I don't think that necessarily means that it's always bad to use it, or that it's always going to have a bad connotation because other peoples have used it that way. Now, if you're doing magic and you're using a symbol that has 9 million people in popular culture understanding it a certain way, how public is that magic you're doing? Are those 9 million people going to be interacting with your magic? No, you're the one interacting with it, unless you're trying to do a spell to cast peace on the entire world or something.
I'm just thinking, with those people's innate vibes going like blah 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 counteract your magic? And yeah, maybe yes, maybe no, but I'm pretty sure my magic will do really fine.
Yes. And I think it entirely depends on how much you have let that popular culture interpretation and those people vibes affect you, not how much it's affected the symbol. If you've taken on a meaning of that symbol that is influenced by those vibes, you need to study that and make sure it's meaning what you want it to mean in the magic.
Yeah, I see that in when I see people making their rune sets by inscribing or painting symbolism on on stones. It's like, okay, to me, each stone has its own properties. Each crystal has a different, a piece of granite is going to be a piece of granite no matter what rune you put on it. A piece of lapis is going to be a piece of lapis. A piece of subtlite is going to be subtlite. You can put whatever rune you're on, and those runes, when you toss them in sortilege, you can read them, but it's not going to take. I've heard of people programming their crystals to do a certain thing. Unless the crystal is being very cooperative, I'm not sure how much. Starwolf, you're our crystal expert in this right now.
Yeah.
What would you say about programming a crystal?
Once again, it can be done. Excuse me, it can be done. There are specific crystals called record keepers or receivers that can be programmed for that sort of thing. But your basic bought at the rock shop quartz crystal, it's going to have its own idea of what it's here for.
Right.
My basic attitude would, if you're looking for crystals to program, get the ones that have been cut and polished. They tend to have a little less personality.
Now, here, what would you think of the set of runes that have been carved on amethyst? I have a set like that. I chose amethyst because of the connection to the higher chakras.
Amethyst would be a good one simply because of they are a high energy psychic activity stone.
Okay. So you
I
can't
tend to
make a
use
good choice that way.
I tend to use bone, wood, or plastic myself. when I'm
Now
making it.
I have a set on amethyst, which has been really good for me. But I also have some that were done on you from England
Mm,
on wood. That was, and they are also
Yep.
very, and they seem to be more neutral, while the amethyst ones seem to be a little more pointed in what they give me my answers to when I ask them.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Actually, it does.
Does to me, but
yeah.
You is a connection tree because it's one of the possible world trees,
mhm.
which means
And
it's
then
going to
that's
be
the point. And it gives me
and
but
amethyst being a crystal is once again gonna have its own attitude.
Right.
but it has actually been more pointed in its answers, less ambiguous.
Mhm.
And but it's been pretty freaking accurate over the last few
Yep.
years. I've used the two of them. I mean, the amethyst does not lie.
No,
It's just
Mm.
No.
a
I find it
little
opens up on consciousness.
more it's a little more pointed. The using the ones from the slices of the yew wood are, yeah, you got,
Okay, I'm
yeah,
trying
you
to bring
just
this
gotta
back
do
more
more.
into generic symbolism, but
Yeah.
yeah, that I just the crystals are people. They just okay,
Yeah.
they're beings, and they just work on a much slower time frame. And I think that's why amethysts are so friendly. If they have somebody who's trying to use communication with them, they're gonna try and communicate back because amethyst is like that. But
Crystals are beings,
I'm
but the wood, the slices of the wood are they are life that's suspended or taken, but they have a reach back and a reach forward, and they do differently with the universe. They have their own personality.
And well, makes sense. Trees by themselves are their own symbols.
Yes.
Think about it. Apples, fertility, oak trees, strength, or getting hit by lightning. Yew trees, connection, but also death because yews are poisonous.
Yes.
yeah. Anyway, so get back
Also
to symbols in a more
but
generic
also
way.
in
And-
that particular tree.
Don, I'm
Yeah.
going to drag in an idea that we talked about before we actually started the meeting, and push the on button on the camera. And you said signs and symbols. And I said, my first thought was, what's the difference between a sign and a symbol? And then my mind went sideways like it always does. And I said, what's the difference between a sign and a symptom? And I knew the answer to that. A sign is something your doctor can see. A symptom is something he can't. And then I wandered backwards and said, is there a meaningful difference between signs and symbols? And if so, what is it? Now, Jen turned up a reference that implied that signs are very explicit.
Okay.
You want to fire off?
Yeah,
what you got
I
there?
found a PDF that came
Oh,
from,
go there. Elaborate more.
I found a PDF that came from a school in England. And they explained that signs and symbols are pictures that represent something and have a meaning. And then they went on to clarify, signs always have a clear meaning, often giving information or an instruction. And that would be like the use your seat, put your seatbelt on sign on an airplane, or the stop sign at the end of the block.
Or the male, female, or the restroom signs or whatever.
Yes.
The wrong one.
And
Excellent.
then symbols also represent something, but you need some knowledge to understand what the symbol represents. So, what would be the examples there?
Well,
we talked
Oh,
about any,
you
well, I
need
go back,
knowledge to understand the symptoms or the symbols or the
Symbols.
signs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the symbol.
Yeah.
And the examples they gave for symbols were a Seder plate for Passover. And it has different foods on it that if you look at that plate, you'll never know what they mean.
right.
But if you unmute yourself, Ashley. If you know the story behind it and have learned the story behind it, you understand that the apple and the nut mix represents the mortar that was used to hold the buildings together. And the hard-boiled egg is a sign of spring, and the parsley dipped in salt water remembers the tears of the slaves.
Yeah, if you know a Seder plate, there are the 5 things around, you know the order of them, you know what's in the center that you dip it in. Each one represents a piece of how, as a Jew, you reached the moving through the Passover. So you got everything from the bitterness through and each one is a stage, and there is bitterness, sweetness, there is journey, there's all kinds of things. Each one is a symbol. And it's like, yeah, there's 5 things around the outside and number 6 in the center.
And it is a religious thing, but it also
And the bone is in the center and you don't eat it.
Right.
It also represents very much a magic thing you might put together on your altar, for instance.
Right. And there are simpler
Yes, it
symbols
is.
require knowledge to understand. And I would say the simple one, we talked about it earlier, the rainbow and the dove, which is instantly obvious to anyone who's read the Bible, but it's just a pretty picture to anyone who doesn't know, hasn't read the Bible, doesn't know, isn't a Christian, doesn't know Christianity. And
well, I think a dove does represent peace more generally.
It does, but too.
Only partly, perhaps because Christianity is so common.
But let's take our example of the signs on the bathroom so you don't walk in the wrong one. What if you're a businessman visiting from Mars? Are you sure that that's going to help you not walk in the wrong one? So, a sign,
or do you even need to go into that? You have a different way of getting rid of your excrement.
If I walked into the bathroom and found a Martian in there, I wouldn't worry about what gender they were.
That's
No, I just go like, oh my God, can I talk to
the point there, however bizarre, is that what is a sign to one group may be a symbol to another group.
Oh, that's an interesting
and we risk. Well, we got into the business of talking to people who don't know what we mean by what we say, and our symbols can do the same thing. And I went right back to that business of the thumbs up symbol.
So here's a concept. We're getting on towards quarter of the hour. And maybe a direction to go now would be, how then, if you want to use signs and symbols in your spiritual and magical work, how do you choose correctly? How do you use them so that they mean what you want them to mean? We have a lot of examples of how they can go wrong. How do they mean what you want them to mean? What do you have to say to them?
Or one thing is to jump in, to not use them for magic until you have really gotten familiar with them. There's a lot of people who are using tarot cards as magic in their magic now.
Yes.
And I think those are the people who have been using them for 20 or 30 years. And the instant they see the 5 of Pentacles or the 6 of Wands, they know exactly what it means, and that makes it possible for them to use it in magic in a way somebody who was still looking it up in the little white book would not.
I would say that, given that, having done tarot since the early 1970s, yes, I know what a card means to me in a particular circumstance. That card does not always mean exactly X with no thing. I can use it with its nuances. And I can use that card in magic. But how many people know how to use that? I want to use it in a certain context, probably within context of several other cards, to make something. I would not try to use one card ever to do
Cards
something.
together will give that subtlety of nuance.
You need a context, a nuance, you need a direction. And I probably, actually, in my personal practice of magic, I probably don't use tarot except if I've done a reading and it came out with a particular thing that says, here's what I have to do, here's the circumstance, and I want to work that into a magical reading. Yes, that I would do. I would not pick a card to do something.
One of the things that occurs to me here is that since tarot,
same with runes, by the way, same with runes.
Symbolic, and we're looking for something more clear than symbols. And what I see is that working enough, like you, Jen, talking subtleties and nuance. If you work the cards correctly and you know what they mean and you use the right mix of them, you are no longer playing with symbols. You have received a sign because you now have a clear answer. It's a clear answer only to you, but it's just like it's painted on the wall.
Right.
So you
and
move,
then you take that answer and maneuver it into what you want to do magically.
From symbolically to signatory. And
I also like to get into the religious use of symbolism. Because that is something that we're doing personally in our family. My daughter took it into her head to say, well, Mercury or Hermes was the god of merchants, and let's put an offering out to him before Penzic this year. And we did really well at Penzic. And so now it was like, okay, let's make a small. She came home. She built a cairn of pile of rocks by the crossroads for him, and my other daughter said, let's make paint a plaque for him. I said, are you going to make a herm? Because I used to make little wall versions of the herms that they had at every doorway and courtyard, where it would basically be a grinning Hermes head with a phallus that you would touch for luck. And I made little wall hanging ones. You could put it on your apartment door so that you could touch it for luck if you wanted to. Well, no, I'm not going there. I don't care how nice he is to us. I'm going to have a picture of Hermes in a different symbolic thing. I'm not touching Hermes' dick. And
I'm sorry, you're breaking up.
But on the other hand,
I have worked for many years.
How many of you have heard the story of where these cairns came from? Apparently, Hermes, being a trickster, did something to really tick Hera off, and so they were going to do the you Athenian let's vote by you put a rock here. If
Hermes is one of mine.
For Hermes, and then you would have heard this story, and the other this pile of rocks is going to be for the people who are against Hermes, and these pile of, and they apparently covered him up with rocks because everybody wanted to be on his good side. Who's going to mess around with Hermes or Loki?
I mean, then Hermes,
And you get these, so there were these piles of rocks that people would put, and if you wanted good luck on your travels, if you saw one, you'd add a rock to it. And sometimes
And
they got fairly big.
you build the you build they're actually called herms.
Mm-hmm.
But you do it not just for Hermes, and it's done in not just the Greco-Roman, but it's done in other things where you build you build the stones where things are important, where there are either magical places or people that were really important, or something event happened or whatever. And you look at it, I mean, I went way back. I mean, Athena tapped me when I was like 8 or 9 years old, and Hermes picked me up right after because, yeah, I needed somebody because I was getting kicked like hell. And he gave me a way to fight back. And then I found other cultures and other things, but they are not. I am pantheon. I will go pantheon. I have Greek. I have Greco-Roman. I have Celtic. I am pantheonic. And I know that there are different ones who reach to me in different ways. But what I found was when you do a thing, click, click, it's somebody clicks it wrong. Somebody clicks it wrong. And your guy goes, hello, no, you're right. It is something that you could take and make bigger.
It's an
You
ongoing.
can take it and you can go, where is my real soul place? And my real soul place is where I'm trying to go. And I take all these little tiny bits. Yeah, the niggity, yeah, it kicked.
Mm-hmm.
It kicked, but I'm okay because I have a bigger kick that says it doesn't matter.
Mm. But
Those,
anyway, yeah, there's but that, so say a cairn is another form of a symbol that if you aren't involved in that culture, you may not get it. It's something that you haven't dealt with. I mean, certainly I will admit that the chances are very good that if you were not familiar with the Greek herms, and you came into somebody's apartment and saw a plaque with a guy with a floppy hat and a dick on it, you might say, what kind of artwork is that? But you'd have to know. So, but
well, and then we talk about these piles of stones, and of course they have the obvious use here in the context of Hermes. But then I got to think about all my backpacking days and how many times I added a stone to a tumble down cairn, which was a trail marker.
Right.
So who are we making offerings to? Who is the god of not getting lost?
Well, or you get to the top of the mountain and there's one there and you add a stone as a sign you're there.
Right.
The Vikings used them as trail markers.
Yeah. So I found that terribly interesting that there was a symbol there that I used as a backpacker in a pretty much worldly context, and yet with a spirit overtone sense that the trail was something important to us, being able to find our way around, being able to avoid hazards.
Right.
And especially if you remember a club like the Appalachian Mountain Trail Club, which I was for a while. You know, you took these trails as part of the living forest, and you made that contribution to them.
I'm not familiar enough with hermits this way, but it was he a indicator, a patron of travelers.
Yes, he was. Travelers and merchants.
Oh, there you go.
There's the connection.
Had no clue, but we were building.
Overland travel, as opposed to
Overland
traveling
travel.
on
There you
on
go.
ships. But
But
they
not
had-
climbing mountains.
yeah, but
Climbing
we had lots and lots of. There's just so many. I mean, humans use symbols. That's just one of the things that we do. And the ideograms, you start out with drawing a picture to explain yourself to somebody who doesn't speak the same language, and then you move your way onward to from ideograms to phonograms to letters and things. And so symbols, we continue to use symbols in tarot, in Lenormand, I have a set of things that you toss, and they're Egyptian symbols. There's lots and lots of symbols that we explore. I like learning alchemical symbols.
We have this need in this drive to communicate. And
Right.
symbols are a big part of how we do it.
I was going to say, one of my most recent books I acquired was Llewellyn's correspondences, and I'm realizing that a correspondence is an ability to substitute one symbol for another. If you have stones but you don't have herbs, and you want a symbol for a certain thing, you might use the stone instead. That means the same thing.
Actually, Jepicon brought up something very interesting that I've started to look at as chemical symbols. Is it oxygen, or is it chlorine, or is it what? Do those elemental symbols, how do they impact what we're trying to do?
Well, actually, you might want to think real hard about the chemical symbols, who are old friends of mine, that are based on astrological signs. And
Mercury.
Do you have something that takes chemical symbols to astrological signs? I haven't done that.
Alchemical symbols, they've got all, not only what different elements are, but what you can do with them in the process.
Well, yeah, okay. I've seen some of that.
There are other ones that you have names that changed in context, like why do we have PB for lead? And that's because of
okay.
But I remember seeing some strange and interesting symbols in the text, in the chemical symbols, and now I got to go back and look at a periodic table to remember them all, because I will admit it's been a long time.
102 in the periodic table. Yes, been there, done
They
that.
would be an example of symbols that are used to indicate a precise thing.
Yeah.
Yes, they are.
And
I personally like the runes because you get diphthongs that we don't have in English, and for goodness sakes, we need a ask or a th. It's like, why don't we have the thorn anymore? Because it's just a pain in the neck to have to write th every time.
We need that.
But on the other hand, trying to change something once you've already made it universal over 35 million people, was it? I don't know how many we have now. Anyway, so we should probably wind up, especially with my usual.
Your timer is going ding ding.
This year, the Changing Times, Changing Worlds is going to be live in the Hudson Valley, Kerhonkson, I believe, and on the 3rd to the 5th of November. And depending on when you're hearing this, if you're watching this on YouTube, this has been not unlike a panel. And so depending on what time of year it is, we are very happy to have you write in the website suggestions on what panels you would like to see, or sign up to join panels if it is as we tape this a pre-con. And so if you look at the panels that have been suggested and you pop in your name and what you would like to talk about, it's a great way of doing it, of starting. So thank you for listening, and this will be up on YouTube shortly.